This is a dangerous world.
Certain monies were made available.
This nation is at risk.
To the forces in Central America.
The buck stops here with me. I made the decision.
We did not trade weapons or anything else for hostages, nor will we.
I don't think there was like an immediate change that happened after the launch, but it was the beginning of sort of this new stage in our company's life, I guess. After Insurgency, when we started making money, we kind of stayed how we were for a little while. We kind of felt comfort in sort of the system that we'd created for people working remotely. But we did get to the point where we felt inhibited by not having a physical location.
When you're working remotely, you do get a sense of being kind of isolated, not just from the team, but also from personally, and that can be pretty challenging sometimes. I just graduated college, and I was still living at my parents' house, and I was doing voiceover and writing, I was trying to become a voice actor. All the voiceover for Insurgency was actually recorded in the closet where our Christmas tree used to be. I would remember coming up once from recording, and I was like, "Sorry, Mom, about all the noise of the screaming." And she just replied, "Fuck, shit, God damn it, son of a bitch," because I was doing combat dialogue, so she just repeated all my lines back at me. I thought it was pretty good, Mom, thanks.
I was in Mexico. I was in my living room making games. They brought me on originally to work on the tutorial. We wanted to have a little bit of a narrative tutorial for Insurgency where there would be like some voice acting and a little sequence of things. Tutorials are hard to make. That was around the end of the year 2013, and we launched Insurgency in January 2014, I think. It was right after the first Team Dev Days, I remember. That's where I met Jeremy Blum for the very first time in person. I went there because I was working on my own game. It was a Source engine modification called Under Hell. No money involved, just people getting together, making games and being like modding. I had Under Hell on the Steam Greenlight platform. And we met for the first time, shook hands like, "Hey, okay, we're shipping in a couple weeks, shipping Insurgency, catch you around." And yeah, Insurgency ships, and it was really well received. I think nobody really expected that kind of success for a little indie company. The processes of how we made games didn't really change so quickly after we started making serious money. But that helped. That helped hire more people and get everybody formalized. I think when we moved to on-site locations, when we really started to be a video game company.
It wasn't until later on, like probably 2 or 3 years after Insurgency came out, that we decided to open like a more formalized central location. And we chose Amsterdam for that location. Pretty much we needed a place where we could immigrate the vast majority of our team, and a lot of our core team members, like especially like our core engineers, were Europeans that were able to on the drop of a coin, relocate if we opened an office somewhere in Europe.
We actually had 2 guys in the Netherlands, 2 guys in the UK, 1 in Germany. So opening a studio in Europe kind of made sense. It needed to be like an English-speaking country, and it needed to not be too expensive. So London was out of the question, and Amsterdam kind of fit the bill for all that. We moved here in November 2015. I remember building the desks, the IKEA chairs, starting to come to the office every day, work hours. It felt like, oh, this is professional now.
It's been a bit of a challenge for us logistically, managing Dutch contracts and things like that, especially as an American company. The decision for Amsterdam specifically might have been slightly selfish. I mean, it was a little bit based on feedback from other team members too, like, you know, that they liked it there as well. But honestly, like in my travels, like through Europe, like that was the place that I wanted to live the most. So that kind of goes back to the selfish aspect of it, right? But obviously, like, there's no regrets about that. Like, I think we've built a great team there, and also I met my wife there, which is a plus, right?
We kept supporting making post-release content for Insurgency for about 2.5 years for free. I remember the process of making the updates was just, okay, we got all this, what else do we want to do? And so mostly maps, new guns, new game modes, night maps, night visions, a lot of tactical stuff.
We didn't charge for DLC, and I think that was another thing that really helped us at that moment, because you don't want to split your player base. Even if you bought it on a Steam sale for $2, you get all the content that came out at that time. So a lot of us were passionate to really just make more maps, to polish the maps we had.
We started to get more people, more talent, and we started to have some people come on full-time that weren't. Like I myself started working as a community manager. We did all these free content updates to support the game. And we did that for like 3 years. We just kept putting content out and people kept buying the game.
And I remember the first thing we wanted to do, like create as many levels as possible. And then we came up with the idea to create like classic maps from the mod. And later on we did Sinjar, one of the most popular maps. I remember that I went to Jeremy, I was like, how am I gonna do this? That's like, how can we create something that was so popular? And he said to me like, well, if there's anyone that can do it, then it would be you. In the mod days, you're always kind of working on your own, you know. There was like a team, but the communication was not that strong. And also, everybody was at school. But this time, everybody was working full-time on the game. So pretty much 24/7, I could get advice from people, feedback, which helped a lot. So Sinjar in the end became like a map from everyone, not only from me anymore. This was really, really cool to see.
We didn't want to be one of those developers who gets into a yearly cycle and just pumps out game after game after game to monetize a company that way. If you look at Insurgency now, it was released 5 years ago and there's still thousands of people online at any one time, any time of the day. And that is not that common, partly due to our continued commitment to our community by keeping updating the game, adding free content, free DLC, new maps, new weapons. The community sticks around.
We added Steam Workshop support post-release for Insurgency Standalone. And there were just so many cool maps, so many cool sound mods, funny sound mods, so many cool weapon skins and character skins, all this kind of stuff. And that's just more content for your community, right? And it's all free. And that modding scene definitely helped keep our player base interested and active. It was such a big deal, we started hiring modders to work for us, like Chief C, who's retired Air Force, just making co-op maps for fun. And every week I would do a live stream and I'd have a guest on from the community, like a modder or someone. I had him on. I remember once I just said to him offhandedly, oh, you know, your maps are really great. Like, it would be kind of cool if like one day you did something like I don't know, like a map like in The Raid, like that movie, an Indonesian movie. And he went, okay, and he did it. He just made a map like that, right then and there.
Ben Tortel, our weapons animator, who constantly gets emails from EA and Activision. Like, everybody wants him because they can just see that our weapons animation are of a pristine quality. And yeah, he's just making them all by himself. He's just this guy making gun animations and just loving it. And yeah, he was making animations, I think, on the workshop, and we're like, dude, do you want to come on board and get paid for that? It was like, yeah, and he just did.
We really had a lot of passionate modders that were just really excited to make content for the game. And we have the community to thank for that, because that made other people want to buy the game, of course, and it just produced more stuff.
We're very close with our modders. We speak to them a lot and try to help them out where we can. I'd originally started working on a World War II mod for Insurgency. So I'd started making textures for weapons. I set up a small team, and yeah, we just plodded along making a mod for Insurgency, and New World contacted me when I'd been showing them some of the World War II stuff we was doing, and they reached out in 2015 to see if we wanted to collaborate as a community project.
We started getting excited at the idea of working on a World War II game. We all really loved Day of Defeat. I think on the team, I think Day of Defeat was one of the inspirations for Insurgency, actually. The just one-shot, you're dead gameplay, everything is so tense all the time. I know that Jeremy Blum is a fan of Day of Defeat. I'm a fan of Day of Defeat, especially the DoD Charlie map, the Beachhead map. That's always been a great inspiration for me.
Back at Steam Dev Days, I approached Valve and I said, we're very interested in Day of Defeat. Like, is there any opportunity there? Like, you know, would you guys consider licensing it to us or anything like that? And, you know, it didn't really seem like there was much possibility there, but one of the people there told me, you know, maybe you should just make a mod of Insurgency and, you know, we can see what happens, sort of. And I kind of took that with a grain of salt. Like, I kind of didn't think much of it. Then a couple of years later, I kind of reached back out to him about that and just to see, like, if we would have Valve's blessing to pursue. Using Insurgency's experience and gameplay, but bringing it to that World War II setting, maybe bringing back some of like the old school map designs from Day of Defeat, the sort of nostalgic ones that a lot of us grew up playing. They actually expressed interest in it, and I hopped on a call with them, and they basically said, like, we would support this if you guys want to move forward with it. This was kind of a big deal. You know, we were like, you know, Valve, like they kind of control the industry, right? They run Steam, and here they are saying, like, we could basically do a spin-off of Day of Defeat. This was a game that a lot of us loved and grew up playing. It kind of struck us in such a way that I guess sort of carried us away a little bit, and we ended up sort of shifting our priorities around to find a way to make this happen somehow. We kind of tested the waters first. And so what we did is we built a mod for Insurgency, you know, that was World War II, starting out with like a D-Day map and like one other map. And just to get a feel for like if this was something that people would enjoy. And that only took us 1 month. Using assets that we like purchased online, like we didn't put a ton of production into it, obviously. We were trying to more prototype an idea than we were trying to create something at a high production level.
And we decided, well, let's maybe like kick this off and see if we can get some of the people in our modding community involved and see if it sticks. And it did. We made a mod and a lot of people checked it out.
We made a few maps with very basic content, and it got to the point where there was actually a demand for this type of game. So we went down the route of having it as a standalone title.
It was early 2016 where they said, okay, we think we're going to go into and do this as an early access game, because we had a really good response from the mod. It had like 165,000 downloads within like 3 months. So it was, yeah, it was something that we felt like the community really wants.
And the thing is, we didn't want to half-ass it. We had the fire support mechanic, which kind of came from the explosions, I guess I had put on the map because we had explosions on the map, and the idea to make that an actual game mechanic came about. And Jeremy Blum had the idea to tie the fire support system to having a commander and a radio man together so that the officer would talk to radio man and say, hey, call fire support, and the officer would do it. And the idea was to like encourage team play through that, and I thought it was really cool. At the time, a lot of fire support systems video games were tied to kill streaks, and it was very individual. It's like, yeah, I'm doing good and I blow things up. It was a positive feedback loop, but to tie it to really cooperative gameplay, it was quite special.
We built this game to do an early access launch and then a full launch, with the idea being that it was going to go the same way that it did with Insurgency, which is that, you know, we can build something that's fun but rough around the edges, get it out there, work with the community to make it great, and then ship it as a full product. And that's what we did. When we launched early access, we got a ton of visibility on Steam. And it was incredible, like, you know, but the game wasn't in like ready form for it yet. And then the game subsequently got really good. The challenge we faced though is as soon as we got to the release with it and we launched, the visibility was terrible.
The day we first launched Day of Infamy, the response rate on that was a lot lower than we had anticipated. Partially because of other games launching at the same time, PUBG was launching the same week as Day of Infamy, and all the streamers and YouTubers and journalists just wanted to cover PUBG.
But then on top of that, we just didn't really get the promotion or the awareness or the visibility that we thought we would. We definitely made our money back, and then a little bit more. But we didn't like 4x or 10x. We didn't do the amount of multiples that we felt like the game really did deserve to do. We spent, a good amount of time making the experience great. And I mean, it's got great reviews on Steam. It's a good game. Like, our team is very proud of the game that we created. It's one of those games, in my opinion, that fall into the category of, a good game that just did not take off the way that it could have. Maybe a different release date, different marketing effort, different platform, whatever. It just didn't really take off how we hoped. To this day, there's still hundreds of people playing Day of Infamy at any moment. And while some people will say, like, oh, for a multiplayer game, that may as well be dead, there's plenty of multiplayer games out there that have 0 people playing, at any moment, or like under 100 people playing at any moment. We get like tweets every day about Day of Infamy, like, when are you gonna update it? When are you gonna make a sequel, or, whatever. So there is a hardcore fan base for it that still exists and still loves the game. It's nice to get those tweets, because it's sort of acknowledgement that this project wasn't completely in vain, But one thing I will say is that, this is sort of alluding to the future a bit, is that I wouldn't say that the history of Day of Infamy is over. I'm not trying to say that we're committed to doing like a new Day of Infamy or anything like that, but we have been discussing some potential promotions around the game and ways to get the game discovered by people that hadn't even known that it existed. It's, in our opinion, the best World War II experience you could possibly play. So I think one of the reasons why Day of Infamy also didn't take off was the datedness of the visuals. It was still using Source Engine. Like, we basically built on top of Insurgency, right? That was one of the learning lessons as well, is that like we can't keep trying to put out Source Engine, which got updated the last time in like 2006 or something like that. We can't keep trying to put out an engine that's that old nowadays and like expect for it to be successful. Like, we have to compete visually, aesthetically with what's out there on the market. Source Engine was, the past, and we got to be looking into the future.
At the time, Source Engine was kind of going down, like losing steam, so to speak. Oh God. That was not intentional. We knew we would have to move on from Source Engine at some point, and we're kind of starting to look into our next project. And Unreal Engine was becoming this industry standard engine. And we started looking at the tools, had a few ideas for a few projects.
And we thought of all kinds of things. Like, there were definitely a lot of different ideas within the team. We discussed the possibility of porting Insurgency to Unreal for the sake of getting a console version out, because we were not able to release a Source Engine version of Insurgency on console. That was just not part of our engine arrangement that we had with Valve, and furthermore, they wouldn't provide any support for that. So we would be completely on our own, and we were not really qualified to do so. The other possibility was, the next evolution of Insurgency, whatever that looked like. A lot of us had a lot of different ideas about what that could be. And truthfully, some of us really wanted to take things not just like one evolutionary step further as being on like a better engine with better graphics and some new features. We thought like, we could do something even grander than that. Like, we could maybe experiment with single player, maybe experiment with like a cooperative campaign, and also do all the multiplayer stuff that we are kind of known for. That project was what we're referring to as Insurgency Exiles. It took place in the Cold War in the country of Nicaragua, where there was a revolution. Really to show both sides, but we particularly wanted to cover the socialist revolutionary side of the conflict. We thought that was very interesting at the time, to have a campaign from that perspective.
There was a very involved conflict there with the Contras. Essentially, there was an insurrection, so an insurgency in Nicaragua, and the government in place, which was a dictatorship, got overthrown, and then there was another government put in place, and the people that were kicked out of Nicaragua moved to the US and started making their mafia there. And then the CIA in the US got involved into their activities and started funding them money so that they would go back and overthrow the recently overthrown government. This whole story about how the CIA, through drug trafficking, funded the Contras, and that whole thing was just such a massive deal that the history books kind of glazed over.
We felt like that's something that hadn't really been covered in games before, like this idea of all of these Latin American revolutions that occurred in the Cold War, all these proxy wars where they were like very brutal dictatorships supported by the United States, you know. The people rising up against them felt very sympathetic to us in our research. And so that was something that we felt like the gameplay of Insurgency and sort of the experience of Insurgency could very easily carry over into, where you could either fight as like a National Guard or like a, you know, a sort of revolutionary.
I kind of liked the idea of the theater because we had just done Insurgency, was like a modern military shooter, and this kind of added like a different variety and spice. Like I'm like art and stuff like that, so it's like not too old. It's not you know, going back to like Day of Infamy, World War II era of stuff. It's kind of like in between, and you would have like very interesting equipment and character and stuff like that.
We got to travel down to Nicaragua as a team, and it was awesome. We got to, you know, study, you know, not only the culture, the places, we got to, you know, take texture references and just really try to understand a little bit more of what we were trying to do back home. We had planned for this island of Momotepe, and so it's this island in the middle of essentially a lake, and the team that we were with, so about 5 of us, we went on a boat and went to the island, and we essentially slept on the island, which is a big volcano. And so the next day, early in the morning, we climbed to the top of the volcano and took a bunch of reference photos. We were gonna model a lot of the scenery and the landscape of what we saw and bring that back home, and it's gonna be an integral part of the gameplay. We're actually gonna have that featured as one of the spaces that we were gonna be creating for Exiles.
We kind of wanted to make it an not open world, but like, I don't know, it's called like node-based open world game, where you have this level is here, this level is here, but you can kind of travel between all the points. And we just had these idea of what we wanted to pull off.
So we did a lot of prototype work for that. I remember doing the first playtest with only a few weapons implemented and a few basic things and a game mode.
We had playtests of this game. We had the island fully running. We had, you know, different scenarios we were playing and touching on. We had vehicles and that coming in. So these were new things that we just never had before. And so that was exciting to see some of these things.
And I even remember going to playtests and stuff. We were all shooting our placeholder Galils from Insurgency in Exiles, because like, hey, that gun was around then too, or something. And it was cool, like to have a new environment, new sounds, even though it was all placeholder. We really liked the Insurgency platform. We really liked the framework, the gameplay that we had. High lethality, objective-based, minimal HUD, adversarial and cooperative multiplayer, all that stuff we really liked. And we take this to a new setting.
It was way too big. We never actually like went full production on Exile. We started the pre-production process, which was when the name came up and the idea, like some of the idea of the story or what would happen for the setting, but we never actually got into production. It was just too much at the time, I think.
We were trying to make this single player, multiplayer co-op game, which probably had the scope of something like Far Cry or GTA. And we've realized very quickly that something of that scope was probably, well, we were punching way above our weight at that point.
We realized that the scope was too much for Exiles probably about a year into the project or so, and it really turned out to be the case that we were slightly in over our heads. We were very ambitious and kind of in this dreamy sort of mentality where we thought that we could take on something, you know, much bigger than I think we were able to take on. So I think it took a little bit of just sort of monitoring the landscape and also reassessing our own capabilities to come to the realization eventually that this might take us way longer than we are capable of putting into a project right now. Like, you know, it may have taken us 4 or 5 years to make the project at like, 70% of what we, had set out to do in our design. So all things considered, it did make more sense to kind of pivot at some point and decide like just to do something a bit more straightforward and something that we already have more experience with. It's really hard to cancel a project, right? Because you're thinking to yourself that there was a lot of wasted effort here and that maybe we shouldn't have ever pursued this in the first place, And I think it could have been done in maybe a simpler way.
I don't know that canceling a project for us is a big uh-oh when it's done relatively quickly. It's never interesting to think you're going to build something and start and then pull the plug. Because, by the way, the cash flow going out doesn't stop. We're not like other developers. We don't build our staff up, launch a project, fire our staff, and then reap the rewards without them. When you get on the team, you stay. So the stakes are higher. So the cancellation of Exiles, in my mind, it was a blip. And canceling Exiles could possibly be, and I'm not trying to project what will be, could be more of a delaying it. We do not lack ideas. That's the good news.
That decision was also easier knowing the fact that all the work that we had done wouldn't be so in vain because we would be able to utilize a lot of it if we made a new Insurgency. So even though we didn't end up fully pursuing that project and completing it as we had hoped, it taught us the engine, and a lot of the code that we wrote for that project actually ended up laying the groundwork for Sandstorm. That project basically transformed into what Sandstorm became.
What is it? Is it an Insurgency remake? Is it Insurgency 2.0?
What kind of story are we trying to tell?
What is Sandstorm going to be?